Alright guys, so my favorite phone in 2020 was the Sony Xperia 5 Mark II. And now we have the follow-up, the Sony Xperia 5 Mark III. Now, the competition is tougher this year from both Sony themselves, with a stronger 1 Mark III, phone I'm recording this video with, and also other phone manufacturers. So I'm going to let you know if this is still the phone series to get. First, going over the specs, because they're extremely important for this phone. Now, this is the most balanced flagship on the market, with one exception, the 1 Mark III. The 5 Mark III has a headphone jack and micro SD card support, both unicorn features in 2022. On the front, it has a 6.1-inch 21:9 display at 120 Hz. It also has stereo speakers and an 8-megapixel camera, neither of which results in an ugly notch or a cutout. On the back, it has a triple camera setup, including the standard, telephoto, and wide-angle lens, all at 12 megapixels. On the inside, it has a Snapdragon 888 with 8GB of RAM, a 4500 mAh battery, and 128GB of internal storage. The design is familiar for Xperia fans. It's water resistant and made of glass and metal. At the bottom, it is USB-C. On the side, it has a camera key, a fingerprint scanner which is also the power, a volume rocker, a notification light, and worth repeating, a headphone jack. Also, as a bonus, it ships with a charging adapter, something very rare these days. The main thing is missing that most other flagships have is wireless charging, though the 1 Mark III does have that. The phone also supports 5G, and is available from most major US carriers. The 5 Mark III launches today in black or green for $1,000 in the US, and as an added bonus comes with wireless earbuds, which retails for $200, and 43,200 Call of Duty mobile points, which retails for $400 at a minimum from the in-game store. That's $600 in bundle bonuses. Now, I'm going to discuss the price more in a bit, but for now I'll discuss how good the phone actually is. So just based on the specs, there's already a few big upgrades here over last year's 5 Mark II. So that includes a larger battery and 5G support in the USA. There's also, of course, the standard yearly upgrades here, including the upgraded Snapdragon 888 chipset, while other phone manufacturers are taking away features such as the headphone jack, micro SD card support, and even a charging brick. Sony is keeping them. These days, not taking away features is actually a feature. The design is almost exactly the same as last year's 5 Mark II. Now, the build is not as solid as the 1 Mark III, which uses frosted glass, but it's still one of my favorite designs for any phone. The display is of course super responsive, and the movie aspect ratio also works pretty well for this form factor. So it's not 4K like the 1 Mark III, but the resolution is still pretty solid given its size. My only issue with the display is it does not get that bright, especially if you're using it in direct sunlight. The speakers don't get that loud, but they are balanced and therefore sound pretty great. Here's a very brief sound test. The phone is already running Android 12, and performance is smooth for everything from daily tasks to gaming. This is also one of my favorite UIs on any phone, and besides it occasionally getting a bit warm when doing a heavy task, I have not had any issues with it. The fingerprint scanner, which doubles as a power key, is my favorite setup for any phone. So it's extremely accurate and just very natural way to unlock your phone, or lock it. Overall, the cameras are amongst the best on the market, but there are a few issues. So the front camera is still only 8MP, and video for it in the standard point and shoot app is capped at 1080p 30fps. I mostly shoot my content at 60fps, so I'm not going to be using the front camera for this or the 1 III across my YouTube channels, besides of course this video. The cameras on the back of course do support 4K and 60, But when you change to 60, there is a noticeable drop in quality, and that's especially true at nighttime. It is worth noting that all phone cameras do tend to get darker at higher frame rates, though this still is not letting as much light as some other flagships. Those are all the negatives, but that aside, the cameras are pretty great overall, and are some of the most realistic shots you can get from a smartphone. Being able to snap photos with the camera key and smoothly adjust to zoom with the volume rocker is still a great feature that's unique to Sony phones. For people like messing around with the settings, there's also the Cinema Pro app, which has the best manual controls for any phone I've used. Just know that there is a learning curve for the app, but you can of course use a standard camera app, which is very easy to use. Ever since I started this channel, I've always stressed that battery life is one of the most important features on a phone. And a few years ago, I was not a fan of Sony phones when they had smaller batteries. The battery on the 5 Mark III though is excellent. It's really impressive they were able to fit a 4500 milliamp battery in such a small form factor. For reference, the iPhone with the largest battery is still smaller than this one. You should have no problem getting through the end of the day with it. Wireless charging would have been nice, but if you want to have that, then the larger 1 Mark III does have it. That said, the 5 Mark III actually lasts longer than the 1 III, but of course it has a smaller screen and not as high a resolution. Speaking of the 1 Mark III, I'm filming a full comparison. So in 2020, I thought the 5 Mark II was a better deal than the 1 Mark II for a number of reasons, but this year it's definitely much more complicated. So battery aside, I do think the 1 Mark III is a better phone than the 5 Mark III, but it mostly comes down to which size you prefer, and if you want to spend extra for the additional features of the 1 Mark III. Either way, they're both excellent phones, but this year the price difference better represents the hardware gap between them. So in other words, I don't think that the 5 Mark III is a steal relative to the 1 Mark III. The 5 Mark III is not a perfect phone, but it's still the best compact phone I've used. Now, that leads me to my biggest problem with it. This phone was announced 9 months ago, a full pregnancy, and it's just now coming out. It's always, of course, more difficult to recommend a phone when you assume a new one will be announced in a few months. Now, I have zero knowledge about Sony's future plans, but just going by when they've historically announced their phones. $1,000 is also pretty steep, since the Pixel 6 is a few $100s less, but the bonuses do go for several $100s combined on the secondary market, and that brings it to around the same price as the Pixel 6. They're the most valuable pre-order bonuses I've seen for a phone, and they have to be factored into the price. Alright, so here's the bottom line. Now, if you do not factor in the pre-order bonuses, so not including this stuff, then I would not recommend it for $1,000. So again guys, the Pixel 6, $600. I do think this is a better phone than the Pixel 6, but it's not $400 better. But when you do factor in the additional stuff, and of course you want all the features here, you want the headphone jack, micro SD card support, all that stuff. When you factor this stuff in, then I would recommend it. Once again, just don't be surprised if they announce a phone in April. Again, I have no knowledge about that, but just taking a guess. Alright guys, thanks for watching. And check out my comparison between this and the 1 Mark III.